Jason, so I was telling you a little bit about and posing this question of why is the Mona Lisa the most famous painting in the world, which I think it's widely recognized as being just that. So I started doing some research on that and figured out that it was really because of a theft. It's because the Mona Lisa was stolen. So I'm gonna get into this. In 1503, we have to go a little bit of a history lesson.
I'm
So
okay
bear
with
with
that.
me. I'm a history lover, and I always preface that. You're going to get a little lesson. In 1503, when Leonardo da Vinci first put brush to canvas to begin the Mona Lisa, he had no way of knowing that it would not only be one of the most famous and valuable paintings the world had ever seen, but also one of the most important and studied pieces of art in human history, which it is. It's widely accepted that the oil painting was commissioned by wealthy silk merchant Francisco del Giancondo and was to celebrate the family's new home and birth of their second son, Andrea. The portrait was of Francisco's wife, Lisa del Giacondo. And although the work was commissioned, Da Vinci kept the painting until his death in 1519, when it was then in the possession of King Francis I of France. It was passed around then from royal figure to royal figure until beginning its display in the Louvre Museum in Paris in 1797. And that isn't that crazy? That was another little fact. Like. I did not even know the Louvre had been around since the 1700s. I mean,
Yeah,
a little
I
bit
think
of ignorant.
even before that, I didn't realize it was even that it was passed around, that it was in the possessions of that home, and then kind of bounced. I actually literally know nothing about any of what you're telling me so far.
Yeah, and I didn't know number one. I mean, I knew it was a commissioned work because so many of pieces like that, portraits of that time were, but I never knew that he kept it until his death, and he was kind of working on it. That's why I said it took almost 14 years. They think to complete, but the guy that paid for it never got it. You know what I mean? Like, I guess by the time he died, he was the Leonardo da Vinci, and the king was like, I'll take that. What else you
Nice.
got?"
Yeah.
Yeah. But it wouldn't be considered a masterpiece until around 1860, and even then was not the most revered or valuable piece in the Louvre Gallery where it was housed, let alone the entire museum. It was just kind of it's a masterpiece, but there's a lot of those in early Renaissance paintings. I mean, they're all kind of considered masterpieces. By the early 20th century, the Mona Lisa was not widely recognized outside of the art world. While still valuable, it was just another beautiful Renaissance masterpiece. But in the summer of 1911, that would change literally overnight. On the morning of August 21st, 1911, three Italian handymen exited the Louvre carrying a rolled-up blanket and boarded a 7:47 a.m. train headed out of the city. The night before, two brothers, Vincenzo and Michel Lancelotti, along with Vincenzo Perugia, slept in a small art supply closet in the museum. Perugia worked for the Louvre, installing protective glass cases over fine art pieces like the Mona Lisa. And when the museum closed for the day, the three men crept out of the supply closet, removed the glass case and wooden frame from the painting, rolled it up in the blanket, and literally just walked out. And as I was reading this, obviously security even at a place like that houses priceless, or valuable pieces of artwork in that time in the early 1900s is certainly not going to be what it is today. But I was reading that they did this. I guess they hid in there on a Sunday night, and Sunday at that time, I don't know if it still is, but in Paris, Sunday was like a very big social day. So drinking, it was kind of like our Saturday night in some
Right.
respects. So, and I mean, I read this in more than one account of this, that Monday, a lot of people are hungover, So there weren't people like up and early, as much as they would have been on some of the other days of the week. So these guys just, carrying a blanket out of the Louvre at 7 a.m.
You haven't told me too much yet, but like this should be like they should make a movie out of this.
I don't know why they haven't.
You know what I mean?
Patent
Like this
pending.
is yeah,
Yeah.
this is fascinating. Let's write the script.
Yeah, right. Empty hooks stuck out of the wall where the Mona, and it gets better. Empty hooks stuck out of the wall where the Mona Lisa hung for over 28 hours before anyone even realized that it was gone. And it wasn't even a museum employee or, the curator that noticed it. It was by a still life artist who was painting the gallery that the painting hung in. And at that same time, they had been one by one removing paintings to be photographed. And because the cameras just weren't great in a dark museum, they actually would take the paintings off the wall and they would take it to the rooftop of the museum where they had, abundant light, and they would photograph them. And then, so the artist thought that's what was happening. And he asked an employee of the museum, hey, when are the photographers going to be done with the Mona Lisa? And say, I'll go check. And goes and asks the photographers, like, we don't have it. And only then did they realize that the painting was missing, but it had been over a day. It was 28 hours.
Oh wow! So it's kind of like there's a practice happening where paintings get moved, so it's a little less, I guess, obvious because all the exhibits are changing and photographed and moving. Like I could see that.
Yeah. Well, for whatever reason, because again, this is not that famous of a painting at the time, but the media exploded, making the painting an overnight sensation around the globe. Why was this particular painting worth stealing in a museum housing thousands of priceless works of art? It was like, what are we missing? And it just, this caper, early 1900s, the newspapers sensationalized things like this. And it just, overnight, everyone was talking about the Mona Lisa. And the French were concerned that wealthy Americans were buying up works of art like this. And even the likes of J.P. Morgan himself and Pablo Picasso were once considered suspects and questioned for having commissioned the theft of the painting. Can you imagine that? Like, again, Pablo Picasso then, not who he is today, but can you imagine going to an artist like that and being like, where were you?
Yeah, you go to Pablo's house. Pablo, is that the Mona Lisa?
Hey, Pablo, come on. You took
come on. Yeah, why'd you have to put that in the dining room? Come on.
Yeah, the Mona Lisa. It doesn't even end up in a dining room. That's actually my favorite part. The museum was closed for a week, and when it reopened, there were mobs of people waiting to see the vacant spot where the now sensational painting once hung. So literally people lined up around the block to see this empty spot with the hooks. We got some pictures we'll show what that actually looked like. Perugia had planned to sell the painting, but was afraid to now, of course, with all this press and exposure that the theft had received. So he hid the Mona Lisa in the false bottom of a large trunk in his Paris boarding room, where it stayed for the next 2 years.
No way.
And you just think about something like the Mona Lisa, The Last Supper, any of these great. It's like stealing Michelangelo's David and like keeping it in your garage for 2 years with a sheet over it. I mean, it's just, what if something happened? What if there was a fire in the boarding house? That painting would be lost. What if there was a theft? What if they booted him out and said you didn't pay your rent? And then somebody just ends up. It's just so fascinating.
Or like the maid comes in and just is like, oh, it didn't look like it was anything important. I just decided to throw it away.
Threw it out.
It's in the trash now.
My grandkid will like that for his birthday. Just 28 months.
Yeah, one thing. I'm fascinated by this whole why everyone cared so much all of a sudden. It's almost like when we talk about like when painters or artists die, that's when their stuff becomes more popular. And it's like until it went missing, no one really, that's when people started caring. It feels very similar. Something in the art community, I guess.
Yeah, but I think this was, I think there were a couple of things at play. Like I said, early 1900s, newspaper, and you've done stories like this from that time period too, some gangsters and things like that. And how sensational and they make the headlines. Like everything was
Right.
grandiose. And that's just the style of the time, and that's what they did. But I think also there is something sexy about it. These Mission Impossible style, and your mind, your imagination runs wild with how these guys stole it. No one knew that he hid in a broom closet and he
Wow.
worked there, you know. But yeah, I mean, it became something that again people lined up to see an empty spot on the wall with hooks, and that in itself is wild.
It's
So
crazy.
just 28 months after stealing the Mona Lisa, Perugia attempted to sell it to an art dealer in Florence, Italy. And I actually read somewhere that it might have been an antique deal, like trying to offload it. The heat's gone. The dealer was suspicious, of course, and when the painting was authenticated, told him they couldn't buy it because it was stolen, but they would make sure he received the large reward that was being offered. Because there were huge rewards, of
Yeah.
course, for this painting, and so they said, well, however you came into possession of this, we can't buy it; it's stolen. We got to give it back, but we're going to make sure you get this big reward. What's your address? And he went home, and 30 minutes later, police arrested him at home. Perugia said he was simply trying to return the painting to Italy as it seemed the patriotic thing to do. He received an 8-month prison sentence, and within days of his trial, World War I began, and the story quickly faded from the papers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that I kind of was like reading about that, and yeah, that makes sense because I think this would have been something that more people knew, this story, but it just absolutely got lost and buried when World War I hit. And then you have the aftermath of that, and then you have World War II,
Yeah.
several years, down the road. So it was just all these massive world events that stories like this just kind of got lost.
Been worse. I mean, what if they would have stolen it while World War One was actually happening? Would we ever be talking about the Mona Lisa at all? Right? If no one's going to the museums, if there's a war happen. I mean, in some respects, it's just another twist of fate.
Yeah. Well, that was a thing. I mean, priceless artworks. I know that I mentioned Michelangelo's David. I mean, that was crated up and moved to basically a bomb-proof shelter during World War II.
Oh, wow.
I'm pretty sure. So, they took pieces of art because that was a thing, especially in the Second World War. Stealing art was a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it just was. They would bomb these cities and are getting bombed, and there's no one there, and they're taking these artworks, going, when this war's over, I'm rich.
Like the Nazi war chest, of all this stuff, that art and jewelry and all this stuff that they just took as they raided countries.
Yeah, they plundered. I've got my grandfather, my dad's dad, was in the Devil's Brigade, which was the very first special services in the U.S. Special Forces. He was in the very first unit of that, and they were sent. This is a very quick story, but they were sent to try to assassinate Mussolini, and they actually went into his compound, ended up in his bedroom, and this is a story that I've been told. The intelligence they got was wrong. He wasn't there, so each of the guys took something, and legend has it, my grandfather took 2 candlestick holders and a small blanket off his bed.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's incredible. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah. I'm trying to think because that stuff's been passed around. My grandparents passed away. My grandfather never talked about anything he did. He was super secret army guy forever, but he never talked about anything. And there have been a lot of books written about. We're getting on a tangent, but there have been a lot of books written about the Devil's Brigade and this whole, starting of the special forces.
Yeah.
And only now, as some of those older guys have gotten on their deathbeds, have things like this started getting out. But that was legend. I think that came down from my grandmother that was told that. I don't remember ever seeing those things though.
Interesting. Yeah.
I've seen a lot of other things that he kept from the war that are amazing. Things that you wouldn't have name tags from German officers.
Right.
Yeah, things you don't get. There's only one way you get them. Today, the Mona Lisa sits behind advanced bulletproof glass. The temperature and humidity are precisely controlled, is housed in a thick steel case, and has armor plating on the backside of the painting. It's considered invaluable to many, but is estimated to be worth over $1 billion today.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah. In the 60s, I want to say like 62, 67, it was insured for $100 million, which is, again, over $1 billion today in value, which is still the highest insurance ever. And it was the maximum amount. Like you can't, at least at that time, you could not insure it for more. But it was the highest insured painting ever. And I think still is. Yeah, right. So that's a cool little story. I just thought that's it's something that, again, everybody knows the painting, everybody knows Leonardo da Vinci, and you've seen all these movies, the Da Vinci Code, and just stuff like that. It's still in pop culture 500 years later. I've seen memes. I saw a meme the other day that was really funny. It was if the Mona Lisa was painted today, and it just had a girl with like duck lips and cleavage.
I've seen a lot of AI things, like where they use AI and they've got her like walking out of the painting, and like it's crazy what they can do to make it so realistic and kind of go back in time, but also make it future facing. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, but I think, the interesting thing is, again, that it's 500 years later, it's still something daily. You could go on and find probably some new thing that is a spin-off of that one painting. So I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, one day I'd love to see it in person. You know what I mean? Just to say you saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've always heard it's not as, I don't want to say not as impressive because that's not the right way to say it, but when I know how big it is now, but when I was younger, I just pictured it being one of those massive Renaissance paintings, and it's not. It's like 18 by 24, so it's small.
It could fit in Pablo Picasso's dining room,
It could fit in my dining room.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be a very large dining room in a very expensive house if I owned that painting.
Right.